Welcome back to Book Buddies, where today we're going to be looking into the Once Upon a Broken Heart Trilogy by Stephanie Garber. This is the spin-off sequel series to her series Caraval, which, if you know me, was one of my favorite series that I read last year. So I was super excited going into this series, and while I didn't enjoy it as much as the original Caraval trilogy, I had a really great time. And today I'm just gonna give you all of my thoughts on it. So let's get into it. So in case you're wondering how the series fits into the original Caraval trilogy, it takes place in the same world, and here we're following Jax, who was introduced in the second book, Legendary, and he is the Prince of Hearts. He's a fate, and his kiss is cursed, and it will kill anybody who is not his true love. We do get to see a little bit of Scarlet and Tella from the previous series, but they're only there for just like one scene before our new main character, Evangeline, goes off on her adventure. So what was interesting about going into the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy after reading the Caraval trilogy is that Evangeline is more used to this world. I mean, she hasn't had to deal with a whole lot of magic, and naturally the series is her going through different places, but she's more used to it and the war and what's going on. It's a little bit more day-to-day. It's like in Caraval specifically, you have clear outsiders going into a new world, and in that new world you have like Caraval, which is this big event that happens once a year, and it's super big and magical. So I liked how this was a little bit more day-to-day, so it helps it stand more on its own compared to Caraval, which I really appreciate in a lot of like spin-offs, prequels, sequels, where it's still in the same world, but it has a different flavor to it, so it helps it stand on its own a little bit more. However, even though there's not the Caraval aspect to it where you have the entire this is just a game, don't get too swept away, nothing is to truly be trusted, you still had a little bit of the like uncertainty in the series. Specifically, I think like by the end of it in A Curse for True Love, I felt like I was rooting for things that in real life would be terrible, and the people you're rooting for and you want have very questionable morals and make choices that you would never dream of doing because you believe like this would be terrible. You're rooting for them in a way because you've kind of spent so much time with them, and you know that there's more to them than initially meets the eye. And I enjoy when a book or a story kind of makes you root for something that is clearly bad in real life, but you want it regardless because you've spent so much time with them and you've been kind of almost tricked into believing that this is what is good. In fact, when I read Once Upon a Broken Heart, like I went in knowing that Jax is a pretty fan favorite character. People love him as a protagonist, but like throughout this book and like by the time I finished, I was like, why? He's kind of a creep, and he's constantly just using poor Evangeline throughout, and this isn't like a Benedict and Beatrice situation from Much Ado About Nothing where she's kind of able to like sass him back throughout, where it's like she's very clearly a naive girl, like why do people like this? But then in The Ballad of Never After, the second book in the trilogy, we spend more time with them, specifically learning more about like Jack's backstory and learning a little bit more like about like why is he doing this, like why is he treating people terribly, why is he making these decisions that make me kind of like ugh, especially because he's growing closer to Evangeline even though he believes that they can never be together due to his cursed kiss. So by the time we get to A Curse for True Love, I was like, go get her. You must be with her. I will fight for true love. And I also liked how throughout this book, well, the first two books specifically are from Evangeline's perspective for basically the entire thing. But in A Curse for True Love, Evangeline is still the primary protagonist point of view character, but we also get little chapters throughout when both Jax and also Apollo, who is another main character in this series. And in a strange way, Jax and Apollo are almost on the same playing field for like questionable, honestly terrible decisions, but when you read from their perspective specifically, even though you don't agree with them, you can understand why they're going down these paths. And at the end, you're like, yay! And boo! I'm happy this happened, even though maybe in real life this would be terrible. And then other things I really liked in this trilogy is the writing style. Once again, I felt very at home throughout this series. I mean, probably because this is a Caraval spin-off, so even if the story and the locations are going to be a bit different, the style is not going to change too much. So throughout this, I felt very at home again. And then I also quite enjoyed Evangeline. I thought she was a charming, likable protagonist. She was a bit naive at the beginning, and once again, she's also making all these kind of questionable choices throughout. But considering that she is a naive girl, 17 at the start of the series, it's like, and she's gone through a lot. Specifically at the beginning, she is broken-hearted, so you almost can't blame her for making some of these decisions. And then of course she does grow less naive by the end of it, although she does still like hold on to this hope and wonder that she had, whilst also accepting things that she wouldn't have accepted at the start of the series. And then going back to how this is sort of very similar to Caraval in terms of the world, but also quite different from Caraval, is specifically we get into new aspects that I did not see coming. Specifically, at one point they go to a place where it's like, we're gonna meet vampires. I was like, oh, I don't remember any vampires in Caraval, but okay, let's go for it. And a lot of the other characters, similar to Jax, you meet them and you're not quite sure what to think of them. And then as the story goes on, we learn both the good of them, but then also the dark side of them and why they can be trusted, but also why they cannot be trusted. So now I should probably talk a little bit about why I didn't love the series as much as I loved Caraval. So I think because this trilogy was a little bit more everyday life compared to something like Caraval, I think some of the magic kind of goes away. Like when you read Caraval, since Scarlet and Tella are outsiders, so when they go through Caraval, specifically Scarlet, and she's seen everywhere, you're kind of taking it in with her, and you don't get that as much as with Once Upon a Broken Heart. And then similarly, like I mentioned before, Jax gave me he made me really uncomfortable in the first book, and I think specifically after I read it, I was just like, well, that was a little bit of a letdown. I still really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.25 stars, which is really good, but I was hoping for a 5-star, so I was a little let down. But luckily I would say the other two I enjoyed more than the first book, especially because as Jax is a little less of a creep in these books and we find out more about his backstory. And then similarly, I felt as though there were maybe a few too many characters at times. I think I was a little confused. It's like, wait, who are you again? Especially because some characters have more than one name. So that made me a little confused, and there were just times when it was a little hard to keep track. Despite my critiques of the series, I overall really had a fun time with the Once Upon a Heart trilogy. I would definitely recommend it to someone who enjoyed the Caraval trilogy, and I look forward to rereading this series when I reread Caraval. So if you enjoyed this, please share it with your friends. I'm Louisa Hammond, and I'll see you next time.